This episode is brought to you by Upsonder, the easiest way to monetize your drone. With the industry's only $1 million protection coverage free to its members, Upsonder is the top choice among certified drone pilots to get up and stay up. To get started, create your free listing today at upsonder.com. Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith. Hey everybody, and welcome to Commercial Drones FM. Today we are sitting in the desert, Las Vegas, Nevada at the Commercial UAV Expo, and I'm here with Nate Fuller, who's a lead investigator for UAV use in a little company called Bechtel. Actually not little at all, quite a global company. So welcome to the show, Nate. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my pleasure. So, what does your title mean? So, UAV lead investigator. What does that entail, actually?
Yeah, so Bechtel's in the process of developing use cases for drones on our job sites. And so I'm responsible for the implementation of those drones and the updating of our standards and procedures.
Okay, cool. So you guys are investigating and vetting all kinds of different suppliers and stuff like that.
Suppliers and uses and I guess figuring out the ways in which we're going to use them on our job sites.
Okay. Cool. So you actually have a presentation here at the UAV Expo, and it's called UAVs at Bechtel: What Works, What Doesn't, and What's Next. What does that mean? What is your presentation about?
Well, pretty straightforward. What works, what doesn't, what's next. So we're looking at, I guess, a half a dozen or so pilot programs that we're working on at the moment, and we found that there's been a lot of successes in those pilots, and so it kind of summarizes what we found in terms of what works. And then also what doesn't. There's been a few items, but not too many. And then also looking ahead, what is it that's going to change our industry by using drones?
Nice. So you mentioned earlier when we were just getting acquainted that Bechtel has 4 different business units?
Yeah, so Bechtel's a global company. We have business units in infrastructure, mining and metals, oil and gas, and government services. Okay,
great. So I would imagine 3 out of those 4 business units are very well suited for drones. The outlier being government services, maybe.
Yeah, well, even government services, a lot of those projects revolve around chemical demilitarization. We have projects in mining and metals for process plants and stockpiles and mining infrastructure. And then we also have projects, oil and gas and chemicals, so a lot of LNG facilities. And then also in infrastructure, a lot of rail, a lot of airports, and these types of projects.
Nice.
So it really runs the gamut. I mean, Bechtel, people don't realize, but Bechtel touches our lives in a lot of different ways. And a lot of these projects are huge projects. They're multi-billion-dollar mega projects. And with a lot of work areas, a lot of complexity, a lot of moving parts that need to be coordinated. And I think drones in a lot of ways offer the ability to kind of give that literal bird's eye view of the job site and tie everything together.
Is Bechtel an American company, or was it headquartered somewhere else?
Yeah, we're headquartered in San Francisco.
You're in okay. Mm-hmm. I need to do my homework.
Yeah. we have offices all over the world. So we have offices in Houston and Reston and London and Brisbane.
Okay,
Santiago.
So I'm from Houston, and then I should have known. But actually, I had some childhood friends, and they actually had to move away from Houston and move over to Singapore because their dad was working. He was like some VP at Bechtel doing something. He was over in Singapore. So I guess my perception of the company is that it's just basically everywhere.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what projects specifically then does Bechtel want to accomplish using drones? I mean, like when we're talking, we can talk about transportation and like railway stuff. I mean, I'm assuming you're looking at use cases for drones over railways, or?
So I guess I could just give a bit of an example of the projects the pilots that we've been doing on these half a dozen or so projects. Primarily, what we found is that drones are really good, as you can imagine, in surveying. So when we're doing precision surveying using photogrammetry, drones provide a really good solution. Actually, our surveying department last year did a bit of a study and found that there's a 2-to-1 cost savings using drones over traditional surveying methods. So the ROI is there already. And photogrammetry is a very well-established technique for surveying. And I guess it gives a much better resolution using the drones because traditional photogrammetry is done with manned aircraft up at quite a height, say 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
Whereas the drones are able to actually come down a bit lower and that provides a much better accuracy in terms of what the surveying is.
Nice. Okay. So you mentioned also mining and stuff like that. I mean, are you guys just kind of taking this these pilot programs? I mean, do you have I guess what I'm getting at is, are the different pilot programs kind of specific to each like use case, I guess?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we're testing out at the moment is I guess what I'll talk about in my presentation tomorrow, but what I found is that there's really 4 platform use cases that we can use on pretty much every project within Bechtel. Mm-hmm. And then the great thing about drones is that once you actually introduce the drone to a job site, everyone has an idea of how to use that information, different ways to use it. I mean, in my mind, what a drone is in a lot of cases is an information system. So it provides us the ability to put something up into the air with a sensor attached to it and provide data back to us to make a decision or to act upon. And so just having that idea in mind, when the drones come out to the job sites, everyone has an idea of how it's going to improve their work activities. But there's those 4 platform use cases, I guess, across the half a dozen or so pilots that we've done. There's kind of been a common thread amongst them. And so I guess I can talk a bit about what those platform use cases are. Yeah,
that'd be great.
So obviously one I discussed earlier was surveying, precision surveying using photogrammetry. And again, that provides us with digital surface models that our surveyors can use to track quantities or do change tracking. The second one is progress reporting. So just simply having the orthomosaic or an orthophoto generated that's shared amongst the superintendents and the area managers on a project just provides a literal bird's eye view of the job site. And so, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our job sites are large in scale. Not only geographically large, but just have a lot of different work areas and activities going on.
What would you say? I mean, are you even, I guess it'd be hard to give like an average size, but are we talking like hundreds of acres or?
Well, it depends. So a lot of the mining sites are that size, right? So you can have tens of kilometers of haul road that the mine encloses. But and then on a oil and gas site, it's or LNG facility, it could be much smaller. But at the end of the day, even within those small job sites, there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of intensity of construction going on. I mean, these are very intense construction sites. So and a lot of different work areas. So the area managers in these different areas aren't necessarily talking and communicating. But the more they talk and communicate, the more they can kind of plan their work in parallel. The more successful the project will be. So what the drone information allows us to do is to just provide that kind of benchmark, that snapshot of where the project's at, so that these managers can communicate and coordinate their work accordingly. So that's the progress reporting element of the use cases.
Okay. So what do you think? So we talked kind of about, and we touched on like a bunch of moving parts in these, specific construction projects or whatever, or on the job sites. I'm curious, has Bechtel ever, investigated yet? I'm sure it's ongoing if it's not happened, but like virtual reality or augmented reality on the job site?
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's an opportunity for improvement in terms of drone technology. It'll be really great at some point to be able to bring the drones from say 200 to 300 feet down into the job site, and it's going to require a bit more autonomy. And more sensors on the drones for obstacle avoidance. I mean, at the moment, you have drones that have some kind of rudimentary obstacle avoidance. But really what we need is like autonomous drones that can be positionally aware, that can identify people and assets within its vicinity and avoid them in order for our safety personnel to be okay with it. Mm-hmm. But once we get there, once we get to that point, we can then do reality capture from the drones and feed that back into our our VR or AR, augmented reality or virtual reality systems.
Nice. Yeah, I imagine a future where there's, people on the job sites are just wearing like safety goggles, as they normally would, safety goggles, safety glasses, and then they're just embedded with tiny little screens and computers and they're internet connected. They've got their own cameras on it, recording for voice memos, and then you can take that drone data that was just captured that morning autonomously from the drone and then have it overlaid on whatever you're looking at. Maybe you're looking at a stockpile, and all of a sudden the volume of the stockpile that was taken that morning on the mine site actually pops up, and it was from the drone that was processed via photogrammetry, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm just curious what a large enterprise company kind of thinks about that. So I guess you guys have identified benefits.
Yeah, that's definitely a use case. So that's maybe on the 5-year time frame. That's going to involve, I guess, integration of VR with drone data capture, right?
Totally. Here's a little shameless plug. Epson, the company, the printer company, which is how I know them. Actually, they do a lot more stuff than that, and they're here at the UAV Expo showing off their Movirio glasses, augmented reality glasses. And so if you haven't checked out or talked to them, I recommend checking it out. It's pretty cool. And I've talked about that use case with them. So I was curious about the enterprise perspective here. But within the next 5 years, yeah, totally. Sounds just about right for, whoever's making those safety goggles to like embed that technology. That's awesome. So as far as like, in these pilot programs, have you found that you are kind of like searching for a specific a drone that's specific to the specific use case, like a drone platform, or are you just kind of looking for a drone that overall that you guys could deploy across the entire gamut of what you're doing?
So we're doing all of that, basically. We're doing a lot of market research. So a lot of it is figuring out what's out there, and the ways in which they can benefit our work activities. And then we're also, and there's a lot out there. I mean, it really is, I use it a lot, but it's a bit of the Wild West as far as the drone industry is at the moment. There's just a lot of stuff out there and a lot of people with a lot of ideas. And some of it's really good and some of it's not quite as good. And we're trying to figure out what's good and what's going to help us and benefit us the most. And kind of weed out the stuff that maybe isn't quite as applicable to what we do.
Makes a lot of sense. So are you here at the UAV Expo kind of, well, you're speaking, of course, but are you also kind of checking out some of the solutions, looking at it as kind of from an end user point of view?
Oh, definitely. I think the product reviews out, and the vendors out on the showroom are great. Just having that ability to kind of literally walk, next door and have a look around and see what's out there. It's
nice.
I'm excited about that portion of this expo.
Very cool. And here's a question for you. So there's like this, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. It's really hard to, because there's not like a firm answer on this. But whenever you as Bechtel, during these pilot programs, are you guys taking these programs as something that you yourselves are going to be operating these drones, or are you looking for more contractors or third parties?
Yeah, well, that's actually a very good question. That's one of my key tasks in terms of implementation is, do we want to develop our in-house capabilities and do it all internally, or do we want to contract it out? And I think what we're settling upon is that the answer is both. We both need to develop our GIS capabilities in-house. We need to have a pilot on staff, which we do. So Bechtel has a UAV pilot on staff. And we need to develop those skills and procedures internally. At the same time, there's going to be a lot of projects. I mean, Bechtel is unique in the large engineering, procurement, and construction world in that we self-perform about 80% of our work. But at the same time, we subcontract a lot of that work also. So yeah, we need to have a list of reliable vendors that we can rely upon to go to provide UAV services for construction activities.
So that's kind of a segue into one of the challenges that you guys are going to face. I mean, being a global company, there's regulations you need to be thinking about in every single different country. And in some cases, it'll be like different states eventually for the different kinds of work you can do. So I would imagine that having some of those third-party contractors might actually be a huge advantage in those localized regions where you have to, okay, we just need somebody that's compliant, that can do a really nice job in X area in the world.
You're 100% right, yeah. So on one of our pilot programs, it's in Australia, and we realized that we weren't up to speed on all the regulations in Australia. So that's exactly what we did, is we went to a vendor and just said, here's what we need done, can you figure it out for us? So they've supplied us with the drone pilot, they've supplied us with the drones, and they supplied us with the data platform, data interpretation. And in a place like the U.S., so our pilot, Bechtel's pilot, is based in Houston. So we have much better in-house capabilities here in the United States than, say, Kosovo or Australia or some of these other parts of the world.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. So we got some validation there. That's great.
You're 100% right. It's difficult with the regulatory environment just being so fragmented worldwide. And it's understandable because it's the early days and people are still trying to figure out, what are the implications of this technology.
Yeah.
And so it's understandable that the regulators are, literally figuring out. I can see based on the regulations I've seen in Australia, regulations I've seen with 107, regulations in the United Kingdom, it's converging, right? It's getting to the point where eventually I think it's converging more or less on similar ideas. But you're right, it is very country to country specific.
Cool. So let's back up a little bit. So how did you get involved in the UAV lead investigator? I mean, were you with Bechtel previously before you started on this project, or did you see like an internal posting and you're like, oh, cool, that sounds amazing, I want to do that?
Yeah, well, I guess my background is in geotech engineering, and I spent a few years down in Australia on a pretty large earthworks project. And what I saw there was that we would do monthly aerial surveys, monthly aerial photography, but there was always the question of quantity tracking on these
manned aircraft.
With manned aircraft,
okay.
That's right. Yeah, but there was always this issue of quantity tracking, and the contractors would report their quantities weekly or monthly, and then Bechtel's job, my role was to help verify those claims. Well, it was always pretty difficult to kind of keep pace with it. And I just over the past few years have been interested in drones, and I realized that drones with photogrammetry could provide at least not precision surveying. It didn't need to be precision surveying, but it could provide the opportunity to verify these claims relatively quickly.
And then so
at that point, I mean, there was an initiative within the company to start innovating. So
nice.
I had a proposal in the early days of this innovation initiative to do earthworks quantity tracking, and it just kind of went from there. I realized that well, if we got this drone in the sky to do precision surveying, why can't we use it to do LiDAR scanning? And why can't we use it to do material classifications and some of these other uses that we could see on a job site?
So are you at liberty to share what kind of drone hardware you've been kind of playing around with, and maybe some of the software by any chance that you've been looking at or vetting?
Yeah, so I guess the two use cases that I mentioned earlier, the progress reporting and the photogrammetry, are pretty well established, right? So there's a lot of vendors that have more or less commercialized that functionality. So you have the Skycatches of the world, you have the 3DRs, you have the Airware, you have the Redbirds. They do a really good job of providing that platform. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of issues with a large company like Bechtel, and this is industry wide, but that cloud-based platform provides security issues to us.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we need to address and work through. But fundamentally, those couple of use cases are pretty well commercialized by the likes of those guys.
And so what are you looking for when you're vetting these solutions? Some of the solutions you mentioned are hardware plus software solutions. Some of them are just service solutions. Some of them are only software solutions. What are you personally, or as a company, looking for when you're choosing? As a large company, you got to be aware of many different things. Right. It's just the nature of the business. What kind of things do you pay attention to? I mean, and the purpose of this question is to kind of like maybe give some would-be drone entrepreneurs some insight into what how to help them land some business in the future.
Sure, yeah, no, and really what we're looking for is a complete service package. So I can see at the moment what we have is the industry is broken down really into three bins as far as Bechtel's concerned. We have the drone manufacturers, and that's the DJIs and the Skycatches, et cetera, of the world. You have the drone pilots, and with Part 107 now, that's kind of anybody, right? I mean, anybody can go and relatively quickly get up to speed on what the regulations are and be certified to fly.
Yeah.
And then you also have the data hosting, data platform services.
Okay.
And what I've seen is that, a lot of companies offer one, maybe two out of those three services. But what Bechtel would want is someone who can just come in and just execute on a UAV service for us from top to bottom and provide us what we need.
And be that partner. Ideally across the whole, phases of your operations, I would imagine, or, geographic locations, et cetera. Cool. Okay. That's awesome. So we talked about some of the projects. I mean, you mentioned your personal anecdote of doing that large earthworks project, and you had the manned aircraft coming and you needed a better way to do volumetrics or quantity tracking. What are some of the, I guess that answers the question already, is what I'm really searching for is what were you doing before drones, like what are you basically kind of trying to input a drone into the workflow to do, maybe other than like, replace airplanes in those areas? We kind of talked about that with the surveying, the quantity tracking, volumetric stuff. Is there anything else that we're missing? I mean,
so some of the basis for future innovation could be quality control, quality assurance. Is that what you're looking at? Is like, what are some of the other uses that we can get on job sites using drones?
Yeah, maybe you can expand on that. What do you mean by quality control and assurance?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, really at the end of the day, a drone is an information system. And so if we can get quality information using drones, better quality information, more thorough quality information using drones, then we should be using them. So there's been a lot of attention paid to bridge inspections. Bechtel builds bridges. We also build process plants and LNG tanks and a lot of other facilities. Why can't we use drones to do quality inspections on those?
Nice. So if all goes well, which I'm sure it will, how many drones could you see Bechtel using in the next few years? And what I'm not looking at like a specific number here, but maybe an estimate. Like how big do you see this becoming for the company? Do you think it's like a really, really going to be a really important initiative moving forward?
It's certainly a focus of our internal innovation group, so that there's eyes on it from that perspective. Personally, I think, and I'll go out on a limb and I'll say that within the next 3 years, we'll have drones flying on every project within Bechtel. I can see a lot of uses that are just latent, that haven't quite been discovered yet. But once those uses are discovered, I think there's going to be a huge impetus to get these onto every project. And if we're not flying daily, we're at least flying weekly.
That could be then, I would imagine, at least hundreds of drones in there, and potentially could be up in the thousands. I'm sure there's lots of jobs that you guys do. I won't ask you to be specific on that. What do you think about, so there's some of these companies that are popping up, and they have like a drone that lives on the job site. You know what I'm talking about? It has its own little home, and it's got like this little like box that's motorized and presumably has like solar panels on it. The drone every day at 6:30 a.m. will emerge from its slumber and the doors will open on the box. Drone will take off. It'll fly the site automatically, come back and land right inside the box again where its batteries are recharged and the data is uploaded automatically into the internet and etc. What do you think about that? Have you looked into anything like that? And do you think that that's desirable or useful in any way?
It sounds very sci-fi, but yeah, I've seen companies that offer that. The issue is at the moment, and this is an area of evolving technology, but we need better flight times. So at the moment we can cover about 10 acres.
Okay.
With the drone flight at about 100 feet. Because with 20 minutes of flight time, if we could get more flight time out of it and consequently more area coverage, it'd be much better. But yes, I've heard of these technologies, and the issue is that it's the charging of the battery. So he has to come home and dock and get recharged with the solar panels, and then at the start of the day, maybe at the end of the day, he goes up and flies the site. I could see some use in that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's very nascent, that specific use case, but there are companies out there that are trying to remove the human from the equation like completely. I mean, you see Delft Aerial Robotics, DAR. Out there, trying to do that over in Holland, and
Yeah, I guess in that specific use, the issue from a construction perspective would be safety. So a lot of times you can't remove the human element because you need to do a pre-flight check and make sure that there's no obstacles in the way as this drone goes up in the air and does his flight. So you might always need a person there to actually observe it and check that the area is safe.
True, and regulations are lagging behind that as well. You have to have someone kind of monitoring that flight. But that's a great point, actually. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so I'm sure we'll see that kind of technology develop. I'd love to get one of those people that are involved in those projects on the podcast one day to see what they have to say about it. Okay, cool. So from those use cases and from these pilot programs that we're talking about, where do you see the biggest benefit to Bechtel? Like, is it in terms of safety or maybe time savings or even money savings?
I think the benefits are yet to be seen. Like, we're still figuring that out. As I mentioned earlier, our surveying department did that study last year where they recognized a 2-to-1 savings just in surveying alone. So there's the ROI. That's there's a return on investment. The reason that every project manager should be using drones for at least surveying. In terms of where the benefit comes from, it's schedule and it's cost, right? So as the industry becomes more commercialized and cost comes down, and we find more uses out of it, it's definitely value adding, and there's definitely a business case to be made.
Okay. And as far as like some of the actual like hardware that you're using, are you able to say, like, are you guys using any DJI drones? If you don't want to, if you can't answer, that's fine. Or
I guess we can talk. So we have Skycatch drones and we have DJI drones.
Okay, cool. So and then the follow-up question to that was, you'd mentioned endurance and flight time as one of the things that you would like to improve. So maybe solar panel drones, but I was going to say fixed wing drones. Have you guys done any investigation into that? Is that something that you're interested in, or maybe there's challenges to the whole launching and landing process?
Right. So the issue with the fixed wing drone is that they need a bit of a runway to get going. So for small job sites, they're not extremely useful. On more compact job sites, we're typically using quadcopters.
Okay, yeah, those can get the job done for sure.
On long linear projects like roadways and pipelines, we're going to be looking at fixed wings. Now, the issue with that is that Part 107 hasn't really kept up with our needs. So on a pipeline project, for example, you have the line of sight requirement. Well, I know that there's exceptions that are allowed, and I think it's 107.30 where you can actually register and have an exception to that line of sight requirement. But we need to kind of feel out the regulators and come up with a list of acceptable exceptions.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree, and that's a very good point. Is that fixed wing drones are a little bit stymied by the regulations in that regard. They excel at long linear distances, and if you're dealing with linear infrastructure, that's exactly what you want to use. You don't want to use a quadcopter for that, just because the endurance is not as good as you would like it to be. But that also brings up, you see Amazon conducting they're getting a lot more cooperation from the UK government doing their Prime Air delivery project over in Cambridgeshire in the UK, and so they're over there in England doing their drone operation. So I guess if you guys really wanted to, you could go to places where the regulations would be a little bit more friendly, and then you could do some testing and stuff over there if you needed to.
And we're very, it'd be interesting to see how that Amazon initiative develops, because for tool delivery or medical supply delivery, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. The issue is payload capabilities. Right?
Yeah, they're looking at I think some are looking at VTOL stuff, vertical takeoff and landing, get a little bit more endurance and more efficiency aerodynamically out of the batteries and whatever the power source is when in forward flight after you transition from the vertical takeoff. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the delivery, how that kind of winds up. I mean, Google's using a little fishing line to lower things down onto the ground. I mean, I don't know. There's not a standard way, best way of doing delivery yet. Airbus, you see, had this design competition, and they had some proof of concept prove that a large aerospace company that typically moves at a snail's pace can be very rapid in development and actual production of the drone system. So they had basically a competition that had people do 6 months of work, and then they kind of made the concept a reality. And I think it's actually at their booth. They're
demonstrating it. Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, okay.
It's cool stuff.
Yeah, nice, awesome. So looking 5 years into the future for now, do you see more use cases for drones, or where do you want this to go? Personally, what do you see, as far as this goes, the whole drone adoption in the enterprise?
Yeah, I really see it starting with the baby steps of getting out on the site for precision surveying. I think that's a very demonstrable benefit to the company. And then further, once the drone is actually on the job site, all these other use cases just come out of the woodwork. And I think that'll be the interesting thing to see. Is it quality control? It could be quality control. Is it inventory management? We've been looking at using drones for inventory management, using RFID or Bluetooth connectivity to track assets and track personnel. There's just all these other use cases that are just out there, that just waiting to be discovered. So once we actually get the drones on our job sites, and then furthermore, once we're able to bring the drones, like I said, from 200 to 300 feet down into the job site with obstacle avoidance and all of the safe autonomy that's necessary to do that, it's often said, but the sky's the limit at that point.
I knew exactly what you're going to say. Yeah, the sky's the limit. Well, hey, Nate, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
It's been great.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'll catch you out at the rest of the conference, but if you guys want to check out Bechtel, just go to their corporate website. I'm sure it's Bechtel.com. That's Bechtel.com, and you can check out some stuff that they're up to, maybe some big projects. And if you want to follow the podcast, please do at Drones Podcast on Twitter or Facebook.com/Drones Podcast. Shoot me an email or join the conversation on Twitter. If you have any questions, comments, let us know how we're doing. But yeah, we're really happy to be here at the UAV Expo. And thank you once again, Nate.
Hey, thanks, Ian.
All righty. Take care, everyone. Cheers.